Welcome to this free Cakewalk by BandLab beginners course. During this 1-hour tutorial, you will be learning all the basics which will enable you to create amazing audio productions. If you want to master Cakewalk and design professional audio projects like a pro, head to skillademia.com and get access to our full Cakewalk course. Now, let's begin.
Hey everybody, and welcome to Cakewalk by BandLab. My name is Norman, and I will be guiding you on this wonderful, wonderful journey of Cakewalk by BandLab. And in all seriousness, it really is wonderful. I have been using Cakewalk software for upwards of 20 years. I've been a Cakewalk user since Pro Audio 9, up into X1, X3, Sonar Platinum, and everything in between. As a Billboard charting producer, an international and domestic performing artist, and a songwriter for so many people, I have used Cakewalk software in every aspect of my production. I've used Cakewalk software sitting in airports, mixing projects for deadlines for artists with absolute simplicity and full sonic response. I've used Cakewalk on stage with me on my laptop, and I've been able to have the ability to tour the world, opening for artists such as Korn, Rob Zombie, Deftones, Five Finger Death Punch, The Pretty Reckless, and Cakewalk was always there sitting in my backpack. So I used Cakewalk to not only treat it as my much more less expensive, shall we say, tape machine, because 2-inch tape back in the day was incredibly expensive, to also using it as a writing and inspiration tool, right? I was able to, the second I think of something, I could record one chorus, lock in the BPM and the key of the song, and then just build upon that track. I could also record live bands, artists doing their thing, capturing inspiration, and that is the core of Cakewalk by BandLab. The beauty and the simplicity is in the name, Cakewalk. So rather than having to fuss with just such a huge learning curve of having to learn this, having to learn that, being frustrated in your inspirato, being killed, if you will, you're able to jump right in with Cakewalk, and that was one of the biggest things that attracted me. When I first started my journey as a young musician into recording, Cakewalk was easy for me to use. Cakewalk was not complex. I had no previous production experience, and using Cakewalk, I just jumped right in and was able to record my band's demos that helped us get to so many places I never dreamed of. I used Cakewalk on my projects with Capitol Records, Century Media, working with my production mentor, Bo Hill, and he sold 50 million records, has golden ears that do not fail, and is the co-founder of Interscope Records with Jimmy Iovine. So with Cakewalk being visible and being used in all these projects and scenarios, I knew that it was a powerful DAW, and I was really, really proud of my DAW because there was all these big names coming out at the time, right? And Cakewalk was delivering. Cakewalk still delivers, and I'm so excited that BandLab has resurrected and improved on Cakewalk. And on this journey, I want to help you all, whether you're a beginner, intermediate, advanced, you're a producer doing your thing, you're an artist just trying to get something tracked, it doesn't matter. I'm going to help you all the way because in all of our stages, there's so many little gaps in between, and my goal is to bridge those gaps. And with technology, what I love about BandLab and what they're doing with Cakewalk is they're not just thinking about Cakewalk in 2023. They're thinking about Cakewalk in the future and what will make it even better for an artist, which I think is huge because right as we're learning something, with technology being so fast, by the time you've learned it and mastered it, in and of itself has already changed. So even at an advanced producer level is disrupted. As a beginner, you're grasping at straws, trying to grab everything. Which way is the right way? Which way isn't the right way? And as you're doing all of this, the technology has changed yet again. So I love that BandLab doesn't disrupt, but they embellish on the new improvements with Cakewalk. And I think it's so, so awesome. And again, I say that because I have personally had a huge history with Cakewalk. I've been an endorsed artist with Cakewalk. I've been with Cakewalk through all the owners, with Roland, with Gibson, and even was a Gibson endorsed artist at one point, thanks to Cakewalk. So I've had nothing but positive experiences with Cakewalk, and I think you will as well. One of the really fun things that I want to do with Cakewalk, though, is not just teach you all how to use Cakewalk, but talk more production. Because for me, when I see something in application, it makes sense to me. Or when there's a story behind it, or there's a reason behind it, it makes sense to me. So on this journey of Cakewalk by BandLab, we're not just going to be doing, the paint by numbers. This is how you do this, plug in this, signal flow this, boom, 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 get it done and move on. I want to talk production with you all. I want to talk music with you all. I want to talk creation, and to help you get to where you need to be as you're creating your artist identity, your artist infrastructure, and what you are doing as an artist, producer, songwriter, TV and film, whatever it is. One of the beautiful things about Cakewalk is that it is so incredibly flexible. So again, going back to, earlier, I was able to treat it as a live recording tape machine at the same time as someone would sing a chorus. We would put in the BPM in the key of the song, and then we would build an entire track just around that one moment of inspiration. So I'm very, very excited, and I'm honored to be the one that is bringing you on this journey with Cakewalk by BandLab. Get ready for a good time. We're going to do technical stuff. We're going to do storytelling, but the most important part is we're going to add another tool in our creative arsenal to help us on our way in our musical journeys. So thank you very much for tuning in. It's going to be fun. It's going to be great, and I cannot wait. Welcome back to Cakewalk by BandLab, and welcome to the ever beautiful start screen, the infamous start screen. So in Cakewalk by BandLab, right as you get to your start screen, it tells you, welcome, let's get started. Here we can create a new project, and going through it, we've got a basic setup, which I love the templates, by the way. We've got a basic Cakewalk template, a 4-track template, and this little bad boy right here, what I really love about this one is the visual of it, just looking at it, because when I first started recording, before I came across Cakewalk Pro Audio 9 a long time ago, I was using Tascam products, at one point owned by Roland, and who also owned Cakewalk as well. And I had a Cakewalk Porta Studio 424. So right away, this gets you going because it was all I had. I had 4 tracks, right? So I had to do drums, bass, guitar, and vocals. Sometimes I would have to do the music, bounce them to the 4th track so that I could open up another 2 or 3 tracks for my vocals. And it really got me to think early on how to use whatever I have in front of me, right? So now in the digital world with Cakewalk and any other DAW that we use, we can have unlimited tracks until our, computers and sound cards and everything explodes, right? And believe me, as a producer and a mixer, I have worked on some tracks that have just about that many tracks on them that I've had to go through and clean up and composite and do comp vocals and comp drums and everything on. But aside from that, back to business. These templates are super awesome because we get on it right away. So we've got the basic setup, we've got a 4-track setup, we've got a 16-track setup. You've got an empty project where we can even mess, as you see, the music staff, the guitar tabs. That's super cool. A guitar amps template and vocals. And if we pop open each one, you'll be able to see what really works for you. Right away, it'll start with a tempo of 120, which you can adjust, a sample rate of 44.1, which I believe you guys should probably be recording in 48.24, and that'll work for you really well. Same thing if you notice in each of these that we open, you've got the sample rates. These will all change, and you can edit them as soon as you open them. So you can change your tempo when you're creating your own template, and I'll show you how to drop those in as well. You can adjust your sample rate to do 48.24, but 44.16 is totally good. I just wanted to stop for a moment and let you guys write down as well. 48.24 is super great for your tracking. Now, if you're importing stems from a project and you're working for an artist and you're mixing their, project, if you're not tracking anything, 44.1, 44.16 is going to get the job done. But if you don't know what I'm talking about in this 44.1, 16, and 48 and all this stuff, these are things that we'll cover along the way as well. But I like to give some of that verbiage early on so that when these things do pop up and these terms pop up, you'll have those aha moments of, I know what he's talking about. And if I ever pause for a moment, just putting this on the record now, that's because I'm saying ding ding, thinking moment, write that one down, make note of this particular thing. It's so that I can give you that moment to really process what's going on, because part of the digital audio workstation world and the digital realm is they're all so different. The terms are different, but they all move the same. And I'll give you a great example of a tangible item. When I was using Tascam, the Porta Studio 424, when you wanted to hear yourself, that would be your headphones. But if you were using, let's say, a brand like Fostex from the UK, your headphones were known as foldback. And if you were to use another product, or as we use in our DAWs now, it's not called headphones or foldback, it's called monitor. So a lot of times you will run into a bunch of different ways to be saying the same thing, right? Headphones, fold back, monitor, whatever it is. I want to make sure that you all have the signal flow foundation so when you come across these things, you aren't stumped. And that's what's really, really important to me. Time signature, again, we can talk about this towards the end with the theory. 4 beats to a bar, 2 beats to a bar, 6/8, 12/8, 3/4, all that good stuff. We'll be able to figure that out later. But I just wanted to give you all a way to look at all of this. And as you notice, when you open a project, it'll right away scan all your plugins. It'll get you going. It'll set up all your input faders, your inputs, your outputs, get you ready for mute, solo, record, and whatnot. And it is very, very, as you saw, a cakewalk to use. I just picked my template and I ran with it, and it is all ready because we're working on guitar amps. It gave me a guitar amp setup, a template, right? So right away I could go with my clean reverb, my ensemble, my far room mic, my huge, whatever it is that we're doing. You don't have to stick to any of these things, but it's great just to mess with, because one of the things I suggest you do when you're using Cakewalk is go through everything. Play with everything, right? Like open it up and be like, wow, that was really cool. I'm going to go ahead and close this one up. I'm going to go ahead and take myself back to the start screen, and maybe I'm going to go to new project this time and open a quick 4-track one, because that first project I opened was just way too daunting, and it'll set you right up with things that aren't even labeled. Track 1, track 2, track 3, track 4, so that you can adjust it, customize it to whatever you need. We'll close it back up, take it to the start screen, and maybe when we hit new project, you're like, oh man, but I really want to see what 16 track looks like, right? So we'll open up 16 track and we'll go crazy. And again, it just loads it all up with more tracks, gets you ready to go, but it gives it to you in a way that you don't have to absorb everything at once, right? Maybe you don't know what to do. Maybe you're like me. Once you get in really well, you just start with one track at a time, right? Because I'm trying to create a song right now, and depending where your headspace is, and this is a big part of production, maybe some people want to open up the template right away and get at it. Maybe other people don't. For me, sometimes I just want to lay a guitar track really quick so I don't forget, or put down a beat that I'm like, that's a really awesome beat. I want to use that, but I'm not using it now. Or I record a vocal and I'm like, ooh, this is on fire, man. Hot dang, baby cakes. And before I track that vocal or lose it, I want to make sure that I print it somewhere so that I have it documented. So that's one of the beautiful things that I love about Cakewalks. You just pop it open it up, and as you can see in this empty project, there is nothing there. One really exciting thing about Cakewalk is they have what's called Pro Channel, and we will also get into this later. But what is really cool about Pro Channel is that in your channel strip, you'll also have EQ. You can add in your compressions. You can add in different modules, which are super, super great. They're great on your DAW. They're great on your CPU, and you're not having to add in plugin after plugin after plugin, which, depending on which third-party plugin you're using, that can really cram up the space on your CPU. So that is something super special and unique to Cakewalk with their channel strip and their Pro Channel that I think is just super, super cool. You can also open up recent projects, which you'll see here right away, which is great for when you're on deadlines, you're working on a lot of projects, and you're like, oh man, if you're anything like me, I've got hundreds of folders with 100 more projects in there. I don't know which one is which, but I might recognize what I've been working on in the last few weeks. And so it's easy right there for me to just go through it and be like, aha, there it is, working on that track right now. Then you can go to your existing projects, which will just open up your Cakewalk projects folder and show you everything that you need. So the start screen, I think is pretty awesome. It's flexible in a way that it works best and is most conducive to the way that you work as an artist. So let's get started. Hey, and welcome back to a course on Cakewalk by BandLab. My name is Norman, and I'm your guide on this wonderful production journey with Cakewalk by BandLab. And yes, it is a journey because we're all artists, producers, songwriters, mixers, engineers, on a musical journey to chase whatever dream and vision it is that we have. And we're creating something on this journey that will transcend past us to our listener. We're creating something tangible in a musical form. And one of the tools in our arsenal is Cakewalk by BandLab. Now, speaking of tools in our arsenal, what to expect in this course is everything from the most fundamental beginning element of input, output, signal flow, getting it from A to B to advanced mixing techniques. Now, I don't want to bore you guys with robot 1, 2, this and this, pull this down, do this. And I also don't want you to be misled and think that, well, if you do this, everything that you produce will sound absolutely amazing, because that's not entirely true. I wish that it was. But unfortunately, there's an important part of this called the source. Your source has to be immaculate before you go into your DAW. Before we're going into Cakewalk by BandLab, we need to make sure that our source is fantastic. So in that, I just don't want anyone to be misled and think that as long as we input this way, do this, A, B, and color by numbers, that everything will just sound amazing. Now, to the flip side on that, Cakewalk by BandLab is an absolutely amazing DAW. So if you do everything the correct way in the box, yes, a lot of things will already sound great. But my point with all that is that we all use the same colors to create the same things. We all have to use the same musical notes. 7 musical notes in the alphabet, 12 with sharps and flats, right? What is an important element when you're doing music production is that the human element is a plug-in all unto itself. So your interpretation of what is good and my interpretation of what is good are two different things. Why is that beautiful? Because we won't ever be making carbon copies and the same thing twice. And that's the magic that I want you all to keep. And reason why I bring that up is because this course to me is so much more than just teaching you how to use a particular DAW. What is important to me is teaching you how to think about your production along the way using the tool in your arsenal that you have, right? So Cakewalk by BandLab is going to be our focal point tool in our arsenal that we are going to use to create, to shoot out our ammunition, which is our music, our songs, our creations, either for ourselves or for artists that we work with. So I just wanted to let you know what to expect in this course. It's not just going to be, again, paint by numbers, click file, click edit, click utilities, and everything will magically just be amazing. There's that human element that we need to bring in to the product, to the DAW, to the software, bringing in our human element that makes it special. Whether we're an artist or a producer or a songwriter, there is something just a little bit different in there that makes what is recorded and documented digitally in a digital audio workstation, right? Your creativity is documented. We want to create that, put that together, and have it reach your listener with the message that you are trying to convey. So I know that I'm going way off because you're like, hey man, this is supposed to be a course on using this software. But from seeing so many other courses, from learning over the years, for me, even having a music production degree myself, one of the important elements along the way that I always picked up was that you have to insert your own artist identity. The software is merely the means to make it happen, but there's still that very, very important element of your ears, of your vision, of your magic that make that come to life. I'm going to show you how to use the software, how to use the plugins, how to use the utilities and the amenities and the editing tools and everything within the software. What to expect on this course is we're going to do the technical side, but what we're also going to explore is the production and the artist side, using some of my own personal techniques, my own quick tips, things that you can do. And one thing that I just want to make very apparent to all of you is that we don't all do it the same way. And there's a beautiful, beautiful thing in that. So don't ever want you to be discouraged or be disheartened if your production doesn't sound like somebody else's. So what to expect in this course? Some tech. What else to expect? Some personal production techniques. What else to expect? A whole lot of discovery along the way for your artist and producer identity and your artist producer infrastructure. It's going to be great. I'm super excited and I'm honored to be a part of this with you all. Hello, 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 and welcome to a course on Cakewalk by BandLab. I am your host on this wonderful music production journey, Norman. And yes, it is a journey because we're all on our journeys as artists, producers, mixers, engineers, songwriters to get from point A to point B with our dreams. And the history of Cakewalk plays a huge part in that. So when I was a music production student, getting my degree in music production, I worked with great professors, great producers. I got to be involved at the lowest levels, but it was still cool nonetheless, with records at the time that were doing analog and digital. I got to do a student mix of a massive band at the time called Jimmy Eat World. I got to be involved with a project called Gray Days, featuring legendary vocalist Chester Bennington. Rest in peace, my dude. You're amazing. And I got to see the evolution not only of Cakewalk, but of digital audio workstations. So I got to learn on 2-inch tape how to tangibly edit to cut that sucker with a razor blade. And moving that over into the digital realm, it made sense to me because I had physically done it before. So when I would start to use editing tools and quick keys, something like Cakewalk, that was a cakewalk to use and so very obvious into what you were doing. You could see it just by the layout. It was like, this was beautiful. So we went from 2-inch tape machines to ADAT machines to DAT machines to using our digital audio workstations as a way to document this audio, to capture it in time, and to be able to create this beautiful product for anybody that we were working with. Now, the history of Cakewalk is that it's gone from Pro Audio 9, which was my indoctrination of it, to X1, X2, X3, Sonar Platinum. It's had multiple owners from its inception as Cakewalk into Roland and Gibson, and now owned by BandLab. Cakewalk has taken all those versions of what has been done with Cakewalk from Pro Audio 9 when I first came across it as a youngin' to X1, X2, X3, and Platinum, and now BandLab bringing it to life. It is amazing software because it has the 3 Fs, which are so incredibly important: functionality, flexibility, and it's free. It's such a powerful tool. I mean, it is just absolutely awesome. And Cakewalk by BandLab has some very unique features with its synth rack, with its Pro Channel channel strip, which allows us to add modules for tape saturation, compression, equalization, and doesn't cram up our CPU. Now, for those of you that are beginners, again, please remember, if you followed from the beginning, I'm going to be throwing a lot of terms out that you may not know, but I want that verbiage to be in your head as we go through the course for Cakewalk by BandLab, because eventually you will have that aha moment. Now I know what this dude is talking about when he says certain things: CPU, sample rates, tempos, synth racks, MIDI, advanced MIDI, whatever it is. I'm going to start giving those to you now. For the advanced ones, hey, I hope I'm not insulting your intelligence, but I just want to make sure that it's very important that we're all speaking the same language when it comes to production, and I want to make sure that we're all speaking the same language when it comes to Cakewalk by BandLab. And with the history of Cakewalk, I've never seen it take a step back. I've only seen it take a step forward. So it's an absolutely amazing software. So strap in if you haven't already. Get excited. The history of Cakewalk has been a great one because you'll hear those that don't know history are doomed to repeat it. Well, there's nothing here that's going to be doomed. Our production is not going to be doomed. This is going to be amazing. So get ready.
Hi again. Congrats on getting this far. I hope you're enjoying the course and already see some great results. If you want to check out the extended version of the course, go to skillademia.com, where you will find our comprehensive Cakewalk course for beginners to advanced users, featuring over 30 lectures. Now, let's continue.
Hello, and welcome to Cakewalk by BandLab Basic and Essential Settings. I am your host on this journey, Norman. Now, let's get started. Cakewalk, with its namesake, is a cakewalk to use. It is very easy to get into. Now, although we haven't installed it yet, one of the things that I just want to cover so you start to get used to it when we come across it is, as I've mentioned before, I want to throw a lot of verbiage at you all because whether you're a novice, whether you're advanced, sometimes there's either barriers or gaps or just missing components to where your production terminology is. And as we discussed before, in the production world, much like in many other professions, there's so many different ways to say the same things. One of the examples I gave you was headphones with a Tascam old cassette recorder, but a Fostex would be called foldback. And digital audio workstations can refer to it as input monitoring, So I just want to make sure that as we're going through it, just to backtrack real quick, even though we haven't installed anything yet, you're already have been introduced to the start screen. You're already seeing the software here on your screen as well as mine. I want you to just be able to get used to it. You start looking at it, you start seeing a lot of the same things, save, open, start screen, synth rack, your templates over here on the right with all the different things you can do, such as none, advanced, arranger, make beats, and you can apply workspace on a project load. So the more you see it, the more we talk about it, the more it's going to click. So forgive me if sometimes it seems I'm either too many steps ahead, and also forgive me if it seems like I'm maybe too many steps behind, but that's just because I want to ensure that we are all speaking the same musical production language. Now, in terms of basic settings, when we're looking at the DAW for the first time, we're about to get a project going, let's say we've been on our start screen, right? And our start screen comes up and we're like, well, to be sure that our interface is good and everything that's good, we're going to go ahead and go into Edit, Preferences. In our devices, we want to make sure that we have for me, I'm using a Focusrite right now, 212. So that'll pop up in here. We want to make sure that the speakers are getting the output. Driver settings. You want to make sure that your playback timing master is coming from your interface, that your recording timing master is also coming from that same interface, because you want to hear what's going into that interface and you want to hear it come out. Your audio driver bit depth should be at 24. Now, if you need to bump that up, you can later. We'll talk about this later, but just keep it at 24 because that's very stock. That's very good. Your stereo panning law, you want to keep this at 0 dB in center, because over time you may get real advanced and you want something a little different, where you want a -3 dB center, a -6 dB with a linear taper, but just get your stereo panning law at 0 dB and that's going to get you going already. Now, under default settings for new projects, every time you create a new project, be it out of a template over here, or you're just opening a new track for the first time, your sample rate, you can make it 44.1, 48. I recommend doing 48. In your mixing latency, you can start with at least 4 buffers, but you want your buffer size to be fast versus safe. Now, why this is important is because if we're going fast, your buffer's moving fast, we're able to handle all the plugins, right? And you'll adjust this little slider over time, depending on what's happening with your CPU, how much information you're sending to it. You may have to make it bigger. You may have to make room for all these things just computing all at once as you're trying to do a mix down and you've got MIDI instruments running, you've got a ton of plugins going on, and there's just a whole lot happening and it feels like your audio engine is junking up like this, right? Well, that's where our buffer is going to come into play, but as we go through the course, we'll work on this. Your wave profiler, you want to get in there, 32-bit wave API. And what that's doing was just running through every possible channel that I could have, from 11025 hertz to 384,000 hertz. And that's just technical jargon, but the computer is saying that we're good to go. We're not receiving any errors, right? On your playback and recording, your driver mode can be at MME 32-bit, which is running off your laptop. For those that are using an interface, ASIO is going to be the way to go. And you'll see how we change that to ASIO now. So that way I'm getting the right input and the right output, and the computer and the interface and everybody are sending the same information. You can use your microphone off your computer to record things, but let's be real. We're all using interfaces. If you're recording something off a microphone on your laptop, going back to talking about source signal and your source being everything, which we will cover, that's kind of a bad move. So we want to ensure that we're using an interface. There's so many inexpensive ones out in the marketplace, and you can tie it in as ASIO, and you've got a couple inputs. You've got your mic, your guitars, you can go anywhere from 2 inputs to 16 to 64 to, it doesn't matter what you're using. I use multiple interfaces. I have interfaces tied together by Tascam, which at one point was in the Cakewalk family when they were owned by Roland. So it's just a beautiful way to get things moving quickly and easy. And the reason why I say it's beautiful beautiful is because we've evolved so much. What used to be so incredibly archaic in terms of just trying to get your audio into your computer. I mean, I would be using the recorder adapters, RCAs. It was pretty ridiculous when I first got started using, a Tascam Porta Studio, which was part of the Cakewalk family, and bunching that audio into one input into my computer tower and expecting it to be something massive, right? And this goes back to the source. So the software is free. So if you can get your hands on an interface, do it, because it will change the game on what you are doing with your work. I guarantee it. Not only do you have multiple inputs to plug in, and you have a way to control your headphones and your speakers, which we don't want too many words confused, right? Monitors and monitors, computer monitor, speakers. So as long as you have a delineation there when you're working on your stuff, that will help you. So we want to delineate that, monitors are referred to as speakers, studio monitors. We want to have our computer monitor, that is our screen. But, in the studio, for me, I call it cans. So that way I know what's going on with my headphones, right? Or I'm like, crank it in the mains. And the mains are being, our studio speaker monitors. But anyhow, if you have an interface that will just help you to get through everything quickly, swiftly, plug it in with your USB, and you are so good to go. It's ridiculous. Now, when you're starting up with your basic settings with Cakewalk by BandLab, there's going to be a lot of default settings that will already be so incredibly helpful. You don't have to worry about anything. You don't have to select them. It will already be there by default, which is the multi-processing engine. This is great because it's going to process multiple things in the engine and help make this, push along a little more. We're going to use MMCSS, and that just connects to our audio driver, making sure that everything is running smoothly. We're always going to stream audio through the effects. Yes, because we want to hear what's coming on with our plugins and whatnot. And again, everything will be default with our online render, offline render, vocal sync. There's different things you can change to later, but what these are, and we'll discuss them later when we get into vocal sync and those sorts of things, are just the different options when we're going to quantize, when we're wanting to tighten up vocals and make two vocals move exactly the same way. We can use different ways to render them, be it groove, percussion, elastic pro, elastic efficient, and that's just to be able to have different ways to swing that audio, right? Because maybe it's going to tie these three vocal tracks that you did together a little too tight and they're missing the human element. Maybe it's going to swing it a little too loose, or maybe it's going to render it and read it in a percussive form and the way percussion would be performed, or maybe there's something you want just a little bit loose, elastic. There you go, right? And your offline render, same thing. It's just a bunch of different options. Your radius pitch coherence and your radius phase coherence will all be at 50%. So these are basic, these are essential, and they will come default already. So you will be good to go. In your configuration file, same thing. Everything is going to be set up for you in default, from your restart engine in your properties all the way down to your extra plugin buffs. Everything will be default. There'll be nothing that you need to mess with, which is great about Cakewalk because it's just, again, easy to use and it sets it up for us in so many ways. In sync and caching and synchronization, we'll have full chase lock, and it's best when chasing to MIDI timecode. That way that we're using everything the same way and we're all using the multi-instrument digital interface. That is what MIDI is. So we have SMPTE time codes. With the SMPTE time code, when it's detected, we'll ask first and then we'll switch the clock to that source. So we will want all of our clocks to be the same thing. So again, the beautiful thing about Cakewalk, it'll set us up right out the gate. When your clock source is set to SMPTE, MTC, or MIDI sync, pressing play in Cakewalk will switch current clock to source and start playback. That's just making sure that, again, everything is on the same clock, so you never really have to worry about that. Now, when I was talking about the buffer size, the playback input and output, we've got 256, input and output 256. The higher your buffer is, the more that can handle, but we start basic at 256. And the reason for that is latency issues. So if you've got a really high buffer, that's over 1000, for example, when you're doing your input monitoring or foldback or headphones or monitoring, you're going to hear yourself a couple milliseconds afterward. And when you're recording, that'll drive you crazy. So that's why you want to have your buffer size really tiny when you're in recording mode at 256. And then when you go into mix mode, if you need to jack that buffer all the way up to make room for those plugins, so that's the way to do that. And when we get into mixing, I'll show you that. In the recording latency adjustment samples, the device it's going to follow is your interface. For me, I'm using a Focusrite USB ASIO 2 in, 2 out. And that's one I recommend, by the way. It's inexpensive, it's powerful, it's simple to use. And you know what? If you're using an interface while you're also watching this course, it'll be even more complimentary because we are both using the same language and we're both using the same devices. On to the next. Hello, and welcome back to Cakewalk by BandLab. I am your host on this exquisite journey on Cakewalk by BandLab. So basic and essential settings, part 2. So the first part we went over audio devices, audio driver settings, audio playback and recording, audio configuration file, audio sync and caching. Now we're going to jump into MIDI. Now again, with Cakewalk and its namesake being a cakewalk, it is a cakewalk to use. So one of the great things, like many DAWs, Cakewalk by BandLab will automatically set a lot of things up for you. So in our MIDI devices, you don't see anything now under inputs, friendly name and device name. And the reason for that is that I don't have any MIDI instruments connected. If I did, such as my Akai MPK Mini Professional that I love to use in the studio, you would see it pop up under inputs. You would also see it pop up under outputs, and it would give us the name of the product and the device name. Intuitively, Cakewalk by BandLab will always set these up by default as soon as you plug them in. That's something that's just, I think, super great. Plug and play. And when you have a plug and play device, which pretty much a lot of things are now, you pop them in, the driver will install, you're good to go, and then it will be read by the Cakewalk MIDI device reader. Now in MIDI playback and recording, our driver mode, as you can see, we have two different ones, MME and UWP. For specific MIDI echo, MIDI playback buffer size, and which MIDI events should be recorded, we're going to get into this section. Now, these settings, again, are all by default, which is super great, but I want to go through them because there's been many times on my journey, because I'm so anxious to get in, I don't look at certain things. And early on in the game for me, I didn't care about anything that was happening with my software other than just I wanted to open it up, create a track, set up an input, and record. And that was it, right? It was like, why do I need to know everything else? Problems came when I had an issue or I encountered a technical issue. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know the language. I would, ask friends at that time. I would search the internet. I would ask, my production friends, my production mentors, everybody. But when you don't understand the language and then you don't understand your software from top to bottom, it can be incredibly problematic simply because you're not understanding even when someone's giving you a quick tip, right? So forgive me now for what may seem like I'm going through every single item within the software. That's because I want it to be great for you. So if you ever have to Google something, you're having a problem with Cakewalk by BandLab and you're having an issue with your MIDI playback and recording, and you Google it and it says you need to change your, driver mode from UWP to MME, boom, you're going to know, and you're going to be like, thank you, Norman, for going step by step, boring me, but giving me every piece of this, because the more confident that you are in your knowledge of your software, the more confident you will be when you are creating your music, you are producing, and you are writing, and you are performing. So under record, what will be default is we're going to record our MIDI notes, the MIDI controller, the patch changes, meaning anything that we do with our virtual studio instrument, our pitch wheel, anything you do with the pitch wheel. So you can, on your MIDI keyboard, for those of you that are familiar, go your mod wheel, right? Your system exclusive. And then under playback, we're always going to echo current MIDI track. Your MIDI files will always use sys banks for MIDI files instead of sys data. This is important because the MIDI file will be created in a bank that will help your software automatically go back to it. Again, Cakewalk being so incredibly intuitive, it just picks up on it, which is super great. Now, under your MIDI instruments, we will have every channel to assign instrument definitions to MIDI output channels and configurations. And as you'll see here, we'll want to save changes for the next session is clicked. We'll use the instrument, whatever it is that we're picking. Our default one, which could be the Akai. We're using general MIDI. We're using drums. Heck, let's say we're pulling up the piano roll. All right. We don't have any cool handy dandy MIDI keyboard. Or you're like me back in the day, sitting in an airport. My flight is delayed, let's say 9 hours. You're sitting there for 9 hours. I'm painting the picture for you guys. And you're like, man, well, if I'm going to sit here for 9 hours, I've got this really great song idea. There's been many times I've been working on a project for a client. And I'm like, oh, man, I really wish I could access this project right now. Wait a minute. thanks to Cakewalk, I would actually just pull up the MIDI piano roll and I would go in there and edit. And it saved my behind, I don't know how many times. Now under MIDI control surfaces, we'll select any control surface you want to use in Cakewalk and we'll import the active data. So if we were to have a Cakewalk controller, an Oxygen 8, even my Kai MPK Mini, we can assign those controllers to the controller being right there, the surface, the import, the output, we'll refresh frequency and all those things again with your WAI display, and your control strips are visible in all the strips. All this stuff will make sense later. I'm running through it now, but the reason why is when we go back to it later, or you run into it even on your own journey and you plug something in, and again, you got to do the Google thing. You're like, I'm having a problem. My MIDI control surface isn't working, and it's telling you, oh, your controller surface has to read and you have to import the active data. As you're reading it, you're going to be like, aha, I remember taking that course, and here it is. And then you would simply hit apply. Hello, 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 and welcome back to a course on Cakewalk by BandLab. Now, previously in basic and essential settings, part 1 and 2, we covered everything under audio and everything under MIDI. Now we're going to get into the file preferences. Now, why these are important to know and why I'm showing them to you previous to doing installation, if you haven't already, is simply because I want you to foundationally be familiar with every part of your software. I cannot stress how important that is because, again, I will use myself as an example. When I first started working on my music production, and even now, I've been fortunate to have Billboard Top 40s, travel the world internationally and domestically with my music, and had a multi-platinum production mentor. Something always happened with me. I wanted to just jump right in. There was a new toy. I wanted to download it, open it, and start using it. I didn't care how it worked. I didn't care about the language. I just wanted to hear it in action, see it in action, and by using it, it would tell me how it reacts, what it does, and how it's going to work for me, right? When I came into technical issues, that's when things started to become complex and problematic because I didn't understand what was under the hood, essentially. And even if I didn't really understand what was there, knowing what it was helped me on my journey when I had to, search something on the internet. I had to search a technical issue, so I would at least know where to go. And I've run into many people before that, for example, they're like, how do I change my folder location? Oh, well, you go under edit and preferences and then into file and folder locations. You can give them a quick tip, but if you don't know that verbiage or you're not familiar with it, then you could be agonizing for a small amount of time until you figure that out for yourself, right? Why is that a big deal? Because if you've got this great song idea and you're like, oh man, I'm coming home right now just to record this thing. I've had a hard day at work. I've got this great idea. Hard day at school. I'm going to come home and lay this idea down. And then you get onto your computer and you realize, oh my goodness, I don't have enough hard drive space. I'm going to have to go to another drive. As you go to the other drive, you realize that you don't know how to change the folder locations for it to default to go there for everything that you record. Now suddenly, in your audio folder, you lose all your takes. And again, it becomes problematic and you go further down the rabbit hole of issues. So I just want to do you all the favor. As boring as it may be, I want to cover every possible element, whether we do it in application or I just make you aware of it. So now under File, Folder Locations, you'll notice our project files will always go to, by default, hard drive under Cakewalk Projects. Templates will go under Cakewalk Content, Cakewalk Core, and Project Templates. Track templates will fall under that same thing, only for track templates. And as you'll notice, you're starting to see a theme here, right? It's Cakewalk Content, Cakewalk Core. What will change is the project templates, track icons, cal scripts. What moves with this is when you change your project files at the top to go somewhere else in any of these, the audio will follow if you do it correctly. Under WAV files, your Cakewalk content will go into your audio library. Those are all your takes. You can also use video on this as you're editing your song for TV and film. It's really a cool feature to be able to also have access to video in Cakewalk by BandLab. Your Sysix files, your playlist, your groove quantize, as you'll notice, all of this is going into app data, roaming, Cakewalk content, and the core stuff will be there. StudioWare, Cakewalk Core StudioWare panels, drum maps, plugin layouts, step sequences, and again, back into Cakewalk content, our step sequencer pattern, our effects chains, our arranger templates, our articulation maps, and our export audio files will go to all specific places that we assign them, and will follow those files, again, if we do it correctly. So this is why it's important to know if you need to change something on your files and you want to move to a different drive, a hard drive, a cloud, whatever it may be, you want to make sure that you go under Edit, Preferences, and Folder Locations. Now under File, this is where we just break it down a little bit more. All projects, the global audio folder will be your hard drive or whichever drive you assign it to, Cakewalk projects, and audio data. So every take that you have will be in an audio data folder. Why is that important? Because if you set up a project and you don't have your audio data folder in there, and you've recorded the world's next #1 earth-shattering song that is just going to change the universe, if your audio data folder isn't there, then you won't be able to hear that song because those takes are essentially gone. And so until you go through the quite complex process of searching, finding, moving them, it's better to just move your global audio folder, again, correctly with everything else. Now, with your picture folder, it will be the same thing. Cakewalk projects in your picture cache. So your picture cache will follow the same way as the audio. We always want to copy imported audio files. Always. We want to have a copy of that when we import it, so it's in our audio data. We will be allowing importing of WAV file queue markers. Our file bit depths will come in by default as recording bit depth 16, render bit depth 32, and our input depth will be original. Your VST settings, not many of these settings will take effect until the next time you start Cakewalk. So when you need to change some stuff with your VSTs, under our file, we have our VST settings. And this is where we're going to manage VST effect and instrument plugins. What that is VST stands for Virtual Studio Technology. And these are the VST scan paths. So this will scan any plugin, any instrument, any MIDI device that we introduce to our system. Once it's integrated, the way that it's integrated is through the VST scan path. Now in the scan options, we want to have automatic background scan on and scan in sandbox. Why that's important is because anytime we introduce a new element to the system, we want to be able to have it recognized, whether it's a new plugin, a new instrument, a new driver that's updated and pushing a plugin, or an instrument, or just anything new that we're introducing into our Cakewalk by BandLab world. We want Cakewalk to pick up on it right away. VST3 migration will automatically select hide related VST2 plugins and replace if possible on project load. Now what that means for you is, many times it's happened for me, I've opened a project, I'm using a reverb plugin, for example, and either due to a Windows update or a plugin update or a software update, for whatever reason, that particular reverb is no longer recognized. So Cakewalk will do me the handy dandy favor of trying to replace that with something similar, which is super awesome because we're able to continue working. There's no disruption to our inspiration and our inspirato, like I've talked about before. So there's no disruption to that. We're able to continue working, and it will automatically try to find that for us. Bit bridge server configuration will be set up for us, and so will the general recycle plugin windows. Now, when we go to the initialization file, this is where we configure settings in cakewalk.ini. And I need to be perfectly honest with you all. In the entire time that I have used Cakewalk, I've never had to mess with initialization file. So rest assured, you'll never have to mess with it. But if you do have to mess with it, you'll know where to go. You might never touch a majority of these preferences, but nonetheless, I want to be sure that if you ever had to do a Google search, ask a friend, do anything, maybe you use Microsoft Bing, I don't know. I'm just saying that whatever you're using, you'll understand the language. So if you see something pop up that says, oh yeah, to fix this, you go to Edit, Preferences, Initialization File, there it is. You'll understand what's going on. But this one, you don't need to sweat too much. That's the great part. Now under File Advanced, this is where we'll specify autosave, file versioning, and other project file settings. Autosave every 0 number of minutes or changes. You can adjust those to whatever you like. There is no default setting there. This is a really cool feature because honestly, it would be kind of cool, much like Microsoft Windows, for example, or Works. When you're working on a document and autosave is on, every time you type, you're saving the change. The flip side to that is maybe what you're typing you don't necessarily want to save, so you're kind of saving too often. Now, I am a huge proponent of every time you think about it, hit Control S if you're on a PC. Control S, Control S, Control S, Control S, right? Because we want to save everything that we've done just in case there's ever a big explosion, right? So this one is up to your discretion on your own personal workflow. The other thing that will be set by default is ask before sending system exclusive when opening projects. Again, never really run into this issue, never dealt with it. It's one of those things that has just been set by default, is good to go, and I've never had to mess with it. So that's super great. All right, hello and welcome to Cakewalk by BandLab. I'm your host on this amazing journey, of course, on Cakewalk by BandLab. We've been discussing basic and essential settings, part 1, 2, and 3. Well, now we're on part 4, which is going to be customization. So we've covered everything up to this point, from our audio, our MIDI, musical instrument digital interface, file, and now jumping into customization. And this is where you just get to have fun with everything, right? Where you get to make Cakewalk by BandLab your own. Configure X-ray and other display settings. This is where you can change your language. It does require administration access. You can change it to English, Japanese, German, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, Chinese, and Russian, which I think that's super cool. I gotta say, there's been a couple times where I have changed the language just to help me learn the language when I was going to perform in that particular country, right? Now, again, as we discussed, Cakewalk and its namesake, being a cakewalk, is incredibly easy to use. It's a cakewalk, right? So a lot of things will be set up for us by default, and we honestly may never touch certain ones of these again. So under notifications, Cakewalk will by default select show notifications, show update notifications, and show project load notifications with a timeout at 2 seconds. Notifications are great just because you're aware of audio instances, plugin instances, Cakewalk audio finder instances and notifications, as well as, maybe something that isn't working, that is being replaced, that you're having issues with, audio engine, whatever it may be. Notifications are so incredibly helpful because when you're working on your stuff, you'll just know what's going on under the hood instead of waiting for a surprise a whole lot later down the road. Now, under other, what's by default for us is a show start screen, which is super great because I showed you the flexibility and the functionality of the start screen. It's just one of those things, again, like for me, I work on sometimes hundreds of projects. And so to recall something, I'm like, what was the name of that project? What did I name that song? Because when you're writing a song, it's not always the final name of the song when you first created the project. And believe me, I have tons of ridiculous project names. But if it's happened in the past week or two and it's a recent project, boom, it will be there on my start screen. By default, also selected is show audio MIDI change notifications, show tooltips, show MIDI activity on a Windows taskbar, display left on top for MIDI pen envelopes, display waveform preview while recording, display clip fade envelope attenuation, and enable X-ray. X-ray is super awesome. You guys are going to love it when we get into it and into our editing tools. Now with our themes, we can change Cakewalk to a couple of different colors. Mercury, which is the OG X1 Sonar Platinum stuff, or Tungsten. Now here's what's really cool about being able to change it in between Tungsten and Mercury is that just, when you're staring at your digital audio workstation for hours on end, you're recording, you're creating, you're editing, you're writing, you're doing everything, that you need to be doing to create the best song you possibly can for yourself or your client. Sometimes you get tired of looking at the same thing and just a fresh, you've heard the term, a fresh set of eyes. Well, looking at something fresh, a fresh theme, is just super cool. So all you would do is pick the one that you would like and hit apply. Another section in customization is colors. These colors are super fun because they can help you group things together. Now, from me, one of my production tips is that you are able to group by color, or you're able to group by linking in Cakewalk by BandLab. So for example, if you've got, let's pick a crazy number, 97 drum tracks, right? Well, we can link them together by faders, so they will all move together, and we can link them together by color so that we're able to see things quickly and we don't waste time having to go back and forth between screen to screen to screen to screen, right? We can just totally link them together by color, and it'll help us in our workflow and in our mix and recording workspace. Another feature and customization that will be automatically set up for you is specify nudge resolutions. Now, you probably won't mess with these. I have to be honest, I never have. But nudge is simply when you're editing and you're moving your audio transient clip over a little bit, and a little bit. You're able to do this with the nudge resolutions. And so, I mean, if you need anything more than, 10 milliseconds, which is pretty crazy, this is the section that you would be doing it in. Now, in editing, you can specify various editing settings. All of these, again, will be set up for you by default. The real big one that people can run into is blend old and new, replace old with new, and slide over old to make room and align the measures. Now, what does that mean for you under drag and drop? Well, for me, when I'm recording, I like to replace the old with the new. So for example, when I do a new take, because I don't want to have to go back into my audio pool later, and this is me when I'm engineering and creating, find out which take is the better take. And that goes back to our discussion of talking about, well, when you have an artist in the studio, or you're the artist, your source is everything. So don't fix it later in the box. Don't create 200 audio clips for yourself to have to listen to. Get the performance right, get everything right, get the source signal right, because if it is right out the gate, then it's gonna be great when it hits mixing and editing. So for me, I like to eliminate as I go, so I know exactly what's in my DAW. The transients and clips that are right in front of me are exactly what I want to be using. But if you would like to use blend old and new, which is the default setting, you just have to sort through your tracks and figure out which ones it is that you like. Keyboard shortcuts. Now with keyboard shortcuts, you can specify MIDI or computer keyboard shortcuts for various Cakewalk commands. Now again, remember when we talked about C0 being middle C, this will automatically set up by default. And I'm going to skip on this one very quickly for the reason that I don't want you all messing with keyboard shortcuts if you do not have to, because this is a global reading for computers, MIDIs, etc. So if you do some MIDI work and you were to send a project to me, I want your C0 to be the same thing as me. So for example, if C0 is kick drum, when you're using a drum in the piano roll, which normally it is, I want to be able to receive that same information, so neither of us would have to waste our time figuring out what is what. So when you get down to keyboard shortcuts, if you don't have to, it's super advanced, please don't. The audio meter, you'll specify the appearance and behavior of audio meters. Another one of these, don't worry about it. I feel like I'm pretty advanced as a producer and I have never messed with these. So save yourself the heartache and don't mess with them either. And participation in analytics. Just click it and send the analytics. I do need to say, Cakewalk by BandLab is absolutely amazing in listening to its artists, in listening to its consumers, and listening to everybody that uses the product. So definitely worth it. Click it, because BandLab does a great job of constantly giving us awesome new updates for this awesome software that has the 3 Fs: functional, flexible, and free. That's it.
Hi there! Congratulations on completing this free 1-hour Cakewalk Essentials course. It's a great achievement and I hope that you have enjoyed it. You are now equipped to create incredible audio productions. If you want to become a Cakewalk expert and learn more about advanced features like mixing, mastering, and utilizing plugins, head over to skillademia.com. Our beginner to advanced course offers many more hours of in-depth explanations. You'll delve into advanced techniques, explore complex audio processing, and develop your skills in no time. If this sounds like something for you, go check it out. Thank you for joining us and see you soon.